Suze will be sharing the slides for us today, so we'll give her a moment to get those up. We will be recording the session today, so for folks who need to revisit any parts of the training, we'll be recording this and also sharing this and the slides on our site. With that, I will get started. Hello, thank you again for coming today. My name is Natalie Garrett. I'm a program analyst here at NC Pro. So this is the KPI intake survey training. It is the first of 3 sessions that NC Pro will be hosting throughout the month of May. The purpose of these training sessions is to review key terminology, concepts, and available resources for KPI development and help recipients understand how to effectively complete the KPI intake survey. This session, as I said, is going to be recorded and posted on the website. And I imagine folks are going to have plenty of questions as we walk through this. Thank you so much for your questions. They're highly valuable to us. They really help us improve the process and make it easier for everyone. We're going to ask if folks would hold their questions until the end of the session. That we will really have time to dig into your question and guide you to any resources necessary and spend a little time addressing any issues fully. If you will take us to the next slide, Suze. Okay, so here's a general roadmap for the approach in these sessions. First, we will cover a few logistics.
Natalie, you went mute.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
My computer's been going rogue the past couple days, so bear with me. Thanks for letting me know. I'll start over. Firstly, this is our general roadmap for our approach to these sessions. We're going to cover a few logistics related to accessing the survey. And then we're going to refresh your memory a bit about some of the key resources available and recommended procedures to support efficient and effective survey completion. Then we'll walk you through a completed KPI intake survey template and give you a glimpse of the actual survey. Then we'll be open to field any questions you may have. If you have questions along the way, again, if you go ahead and put them or hold them till the end, you can put them in the chat, but we'll cover everything as we round up the meeting so that we can dive fully. We're going to have a Q&A session at the end especially for your questions. If you'll take us to the next slide, Suze. First and foremost, make sure you do not miss the KPI intake survey email. Those have been sent out over the past week or so. And in each of these emails contain the survey links, and these were sent to all organizations with SFRF projects. Unfortunately, these often end up in spam or junk mail. So if your organization has yet to receive the email containing the survey link, please do the following. One, go ahead, go into your email and add smartsheet.gov.com to the trusted sender list in your email server. If you need assistance with that, let us know. It varies a little bit for different survey providers or for different email providers. So let us know if you have trouble with that. We can walk you through that. It's a great first step because otherwise, for some reason, a lot of particularly state agency emails, they all go to junk when they come from the Smartsheet Gov. It's a curious anomaly, but we're trying to work around it. Secondly, check your junk or spam folder. Again, these often end up in junk or spam. Go ahead and check in that folder. If it is in your junk or spam folder, move it out of the junk and spam folder into your inbox before proceeding. It will look very different if you open up this email within your junk or spam folder before you move it to your inbox. The formatting's pretty confusing, and I don't believe the links even work when it's sitting in your junk or spam folder for your protection, obviously. But if you move that to your inbox, it's going to look a lot more intuitive. And those links will work for you. And if the email still can't be found, if for some reason you just simply didn't receive it, contact your NC Programs Manager as soon as possible, and they'll ensure that they have your contact information correct, and they'll get that email sent to you promptly. All right, next slide. All right, so we've really worked hard to streamline and simplify the KPI intake survey itself. But Smartsheet Gov, which is the software we've used to launch the survey, has a few limitations and functionality, a few quirks. So we've provided lots of guidance to guide you through the process and a recommended order of operations to help you complete the KPI intake survey as efficiently as possible, particularly in light of these the survey software's limitations. So we'll cover the order of operations briefly here, then go into more detail on each step later in the presentation. And these are, again, our high recommendations for how to ensure that this is a smooth as possible process for folks. Step one would be review. So before clicking the link to open the survey, click the resource link. And I'm going to show you a little bit about what this looks like later on. When you open the actual survey or the actual email, you're going to see a link embedded in the text, and then you're going to see a little blue button at the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. The little blue button opens the survey, but the link in the text above that, that's where we want you to focus your initial attention. So if you click that link, then it's going to take you to NCPRO's website with all the guidance you'll need to complete the survey. Review the KPI intake survey resource guide and the KPI intake survey questions template. And again, we're going to go into more detail about each of these things. Next slide, Suze. Step two is to prepare, which in this case means work with your team and use your completed logic models if you have them, and other supporting documentation to complete the survey questions within the template. The template itself has all of the questions you'll be asked in the actual survey, but for logistical reasons and because of the limited functionality of the actual survey software, we highly recommend that you enter all of your responses, spend your time brainstorming, sharing this document with folks on your team to get answers, and enter them into the template before opening the actual survey. And then step three is once you've done preparing that link, that template, that survey questions template, open the link in the email, that little blue button in the bottom left-hand corner. We're going to show you a visual of that in a moment to access the survey, and then copy and paste your survey responses from your template into the survey itself. Just trust us, it will make your life so much easier. And then step four is going to be to actually submit the completed survey. Again, we're going to show you some screen grabs of what this actually looks like. Okay, next slide, please. So now we can dive a little deeper into each of these operational steps. Here is a snapshot of that email that you should have received. Again, if you haven't, check in your spam. If it's not there, reach out to your grants manager at NCPRO. Here's a snapshot of that email that I was speaking of. As step one says, the first step is to click that link circled in red up there before opening the survey link, which is, again, that tiny little blue button in the left-hand corner. Next slide. Okay, when you click the resources link, it's going to take you to the NCPRO site page that looks like this. And here you're going to find links to key guidance documents, the most important of which are that KPI, the KPI intake survey resource guide, which is very helpful to review before you begin any of this process. It's very thorough. We tried to make it as user-friendly as possible. It's not, I like to say it's written for people who hate reading instruction manuals, because I hate reading instruction manuals. So we tried to design this in a way that it's easy on the eyes. It's easy to find what section you're looking for if you have questions. Just give that a once over before you start it. We promise it's going to make your life a whole lot easier. And then the other link that we'd like to really stress here is that KPI intake survey questions template, and that is the one that we recommend you download and complete with all of your responses before you actually click that little blue button survey link to enter the survey. And we're going to be continuing to add resources to update and add resources to this page as we go and as we learn your questions. And we're going to put the links to these trainings on there, and any slides and FAQs and things like that. So stay posted to this link. And then next slide, please, Suze. So here's a little glimpse of the content found in those two primary resource docs. So there's the resource guide on the left and the survey questions template guide on the right. Hopefully you can see it's not a bunch of tiny writing that you have to, mine through. We tried to make it as intuitive and user-friendly as possible. So this is a little snapshot of the content of each of those documents. And then with that, I'm going to pass this over to my colleague Suze, who will review some of the important concepts found in the resource guide, which is the that document on the left.
Can we hold for just a second, Natalie?
Absolutely.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but there's a quick question in the chat. What was the title of the Smart Sheet email again? He's trying to Jennifer Williamson's trying to locate.
Email. Are you looking for the term to type in?
Yes, I'm trying to search my email to find it, and you got off of the slide quicker than I could
sure.
Find it. If you could just tell me the title of the email, I'll take a screenshot of it. Perfect.
Okay, I'm going to ask my my colleagues on the grants team. Tommy, do you know the title of the email? I know that, if you put...
I see it. It says KPI intake survey.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Yeah, I got it. Thank you, ma'am.
Excellent. Awesome. Thank you. I was just making sure because with the Smartsheet Gov, I didn't know if it would be a little bit more complex than KPI intake survey. So yeah, I'm glad you found it. Great. That's really actually very helpful to have you do that live so that we can see.
Yeah, I haven't located it yet. I'm going to search for KPI intake survey, but I hope I'll find it. But sorry to interrupt. Thank you.
Not at all. Not at all. We will come and we'll revisit that at towards the end. Let us know if you found it. And if not, we can troubleshoot a little bit on or offline here.
And it should be coming from your grant manager. So maybe searching like your grant manager's name in terms of like received emails might be helpful.
I'm identified as the grant manager on my project, and I wouldn't have sent it out myself. So
no, that makes sorry, it's from an NC Pro grant manager.
Okay. Oh, and then Pro grant manager. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. So NC Pro grant manager, I think the system, the grants manager, I think initiates the survey being sent out. It may show up in your inbox as being from Brenda Smith, who is also on the NC Pro team, but the name of the survey will be consistent across. And just a note for folks, you will receive one survey for each project you have. So if you have 20 projects, you're going to receive 20 emails, and they're going to all look the same, but you'll be able to identify the specific project and the thing there. But I don't want to get us off track, so I'll hand it back to Natalie.
No, that's really helpful. And another, if you'll, Suze, can you go back to that screen grab of the actual email?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I was unable to find it with the title.
Okay. It's possible that you haven't received it yet. So
no, I've received it. It looks familiar, or maybe not. I don't know. I'm sorry to get us off track.
No problem at all.
No
I just can't find it. Maybe I don't have it, and maybe I'm not supposed to. So I'll let you continue.
It's all right. We can work through that with you a little bit on offline as well, if that's helpful. Another thing to note. So here, if you look at the screen grab, if you see up to the top right where I've that's that little white box that says SFRF project ID. That's me covering up the actual project ID of an actual project. This was actually sent to a project, and I was kind of keeping the anonymity of that project there. But that's where the ID of the project that link relates to. So again, as Andy said, you may get several emails if you have several projects that you're managing and that you're the contact for. And that where that little white box is where it's gonna say the name of the project that this particular link relates to. Also, since you're already here at this meeting, we assume that so in addition to this email, you also would have gotten invites to all three of these of the training sessions. I'd like to reiterate that these are all identical. All three are identical or designed to be identical. So if you attend one, there's no need to attend another unless you think it would be helpful. And and you only need to accept an invitation to, or you don't need to accept an invitation to any of them, but we highly recommend that folks do to help them through this process. But you don't need to accept all of those invitations. If you've you're clearly here, so you can feel free to decline the other 2 invitations. So that's just something to know, that they're all the same trainings. It's not a step 1, step 2, step 3. They're all identical. Okay, and with that, I'm going to hand it over to Suze.
Thank you, Natalie. So just to review what we are covering right now, we're just going to briefly review some of the review materials. I'm going to say review a lot. So for those of you who attended the Deloitte Measure Up sessions earlier this year, the content I'm about to cover will sound very familiar. We also covered some of this review material at the April 27th interagency meeting. For folks who didn't attend those sessions, here's a brief reminder of project flow. This is a helpful sequence to keep in mind when contemplating how you can measure performance throughout different phases of your project, beginning with inputs, which are the resources needed to implement a project, activities, which are the actions that are using those inputs to implement a project, outputs, which are the immediate results or the products of project activities, outcomes, which are the changes that occur because of outputs, and impacts, which are the ultimate goal of the project. Also in the KPI intake survey resource guide, you will find a review of terminology using how we use the performance measures for SFRF projects. We have tracking measures, output measures, and outcome measures. We have longer definitions here, but in general, project tracking measures measure the work you have done. Output measures measure the direct results of project activities, and outcome measures measure changes that happen because of a project's activities. And those are ones that are more related to how the project, or whether or not the project is achieving its overall goals. This brings us to the performance measure logic model, which is a table that helps bring together all of these elements that we just discussed into a cohesive model. Again, for those of you who attended the Deloitte Measure Up workshop, this will hopefully look familiar. We're going to do a quick review of this model based on the feedback from the Deloitte sessions, because it's an incredibly helpful brainstorming tool. In order to review this model, we've developed a fictitious project to demonstrate the use of this model. We're calling it the Community Health Project. As you can see from our impact statement, it is a project that aims to impact positively health outcomes for North Carolinians by providing them access to wellness workshops. As you can see, when we were brainstorming the inputs, activities, outputs, and outcomes, in addition to the relevant measures for this project, we threw everything in the kitchen sink onto this logic model. But as you will see when we go through the survey, we refine many aspects of this logic model to focus on just the most critical inputs and activities and the most relevant measures. And those most relevant measures are what become our KPIs. Speaking of the survey, that brings us to the end of our quick review. And now with your completed logic model and supporting documents in hand, you are ready to complete the survey questions template, which I'll be walking through the first half before handing it over to my colleague, Mikey. As we've already said, the template is a simple document containing all of the survey questions with space to draft your responses. Once you've gone through the survey and drafted your responses, you will then be able to put them into the survey via the link in the email. Section 1 of the survey asks information regarding the name and contact information for the individual on your team. In the case of the community health project that we've invented fictitiously, we have input the information of who will be reporting on our project to NC Pro, what their title is, what their email address is, and their phone number. So ensure that the contact provided is the individual best poised to provide data on an ongoing basis for your project. Section 2 is the project timeframe. For this section, you'll select the appropriate quarter from a drop-down menu for each question. For the template, you'll just fill it in, and then when you go in to input that data into the actual survey, you'll select from the drop-down. Note that if any of these milestones have already passed, it'll be pre-populated on the actual survey via the link. For section 3 relates to the project impact. Note that if you have filled out your logic model, you can copy and paste this straight from the logic model. And then question 15 asks you when you expect the project impacts to be realized. Use your best judgment on this. We want to stress that you only need one overall impact, and that impact might be a short-term, immediate-term, or long-term impact. It will just depend on what your impact statement is. Section 4 is the geographic scope, which we've already heard that some people might have had trouble inputting into the survey. However, the survey should allow you to select multiple counties, or there's an option for all of North Carolina. I think it just says statewide. But you may select as many counties as are applicable for your project from the drop-down list. Section 5 relates to the project inputs and activities. So we're going to go back to our handy dandy logic model. I've copied just the first row from our logic model for our fictitious example here. As you can see, we have a lot of inputs and activities, but that was during the initial brainstorming. And so for answering this question in the survey, we're going to pick our most critical ones. So we picked our most important inputs and activities, and we copied and pasted them into our template. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mikey, who will be discussing the second half of the survey, which is the really meaty half of the survey, because that's where we get into the project KPIs. Over to you, Mikey.
Hey, everyone. Good morning. Thanks for attending this training. It's a lot of people, so that's really good. So as Suze mentioned, I'll be covering the rest of the survey, so section 6 through 8. Section 6 is covering the key performance indicators. And then once again, the logic model will come in really handy for this section. Right, so speaking of the logic model, we have a version of it here, and I'll be walking through just a number of different KPIs that come from this logic model. So KPIs, that stands for key performance indicators. And not all performance measures that you listed in your logic model will necessarily be KPIs. The idea here is to then select performance measures that best demonstrate progress and success. Those are really key for this. Generally, we anticipate 3 to 7 KPIs per project. Could be more, could be less. Your KPIs can be any combination of tracking measures, output measures, or outcome measures. But it is ideal, and we recommend to have at least one of each, just to make sure that you are able to capture progress and success. So you'll see that we've now bolded the first project tracking measure that we'll be looking at. So let's dive into a little bit more and see what it looks like entering information for this tracking measure into the survey. So for this very first tracking measure, we have to give it a name. So we gave it the household outreach name. Then we're going to type the measure, and then we just had a brief description of the measure. So for this measure, it's the number of households contacted and invited to participate in these health workshops.
Mikey, can I jump in for just a moment?
Sure.
Just to emphasize, we do ask the type of measure. So we're asking you to put your measure, theoretically, into one of those 3 buckets, the tracking, output, or outcome. But we really want to stress that is it can be very subjective, right? So for your project, you know best. We assume you know best. You are the expert on your project. This is not a graded assignment. Use your best judgment there. You know, it's hard to get a right or wrong answer with this. Don't let this slow you down. Don't be like, oh, I don't know if it's tracking or output or outcome. Do not let that slow you down. Use your best judgment. Pick a bucket. When, you know, look at the reference materials there. Look at that one slide that says what each is, and then use your best judgment, pick a bucket and move on. So we just want to emphasize that some of those measures will straddle more than one bucket. You know, some of those measures may not seem to clearly fit into any of those buckets. So don't let that slow you down. Just use your best judgment and pick one. We really want to emphasize that because I feel like, you know, our definitions of tracking, output, and outcome may not match what other folks, you know, may affiliate with each of those. We're just using these to help you. That terminology is more to help you and guide you when you're thinking about different types of performance measures that you may be able to measure for your project. It's really a guidance tool and a prep tool. So look at it like that to help you organize your thoughts. And I just want to make that clear that this is not a test. Okay, thank you, Mikey. Move on.
Yeah, so I believe we're on the next slide. We'll be looking at the unit of measurement for the different KPIs. So for this one, we're looking at the actual number of households. Then we would also ask you to identify how you plan to measure it or acquire the data for this KPI. So for this one, as you can see that we're looking at, we would have some kind of phone record of whether someone picked up the phone, and that's how we would actually be capturing the data associated with this specific tracking measure. So then on the next slide, we'll be looking at, we have a couple of different questions about measurement start date, and then when you finish tracking data for the KPIs, these are all drop downs where you'd be able to select the exact quarter. Note that the quarters are actually backdated for projects that have already passed these milestones. Some of your KPIs may only track over the course of one quarter. That's also okay. We also ask you to let us know how often you intend to report on each KPI for shorter term project tracking and output measures. We anticipate quarterly reporting, while longer term output or outcome measures may be measured or reported on a semi-annual or annual basis, and those are all part of that drop-down menu. So you can select quarterly, semi-annually, or annually, depending on what's the most appropriate fit for that project. All right, moving on. So some additional questions. We also want to know if your KPI has an equity component to it. So that is, does your KPI measure progress towards equity? So it's just a yes or no question, and we provide a definition of what we actually mean by that. Then we also ask for information on how that data is disaggregated. And then we request that you were able to then describe how that KPI can be disaggregated across equity dimensions, including things such as race, socioeconomic status, gender, ethnicity, ability, or etc. So all of that was just for that first tracking measure. So on the next slide, we'll see that we'll be going through one more tracking measure. So I might speed this one up a little bit because it's a lot of the same questions, but we just wanted to have an additional tracking measure for this presentation. So on this tracking measure, on the next slide, we'll see that we're actually looking at the curriculum completion rate for this fictitious project. So that's the name of the measure. Again, this is another tracking measure. And then the description of this is just the % of total workshop curriculum developed. So we're still in that kind of planning phase. What are our activities as this entity creating these workshops? It is the actual curriculum needed to execute these workshops. Unit of measurement, we want it to be a % of the curriculum that actually gets completed. And then what is the measuring strategy or data source? It would be some internal progress report. So a project manager's log of the curriculum development progress. Moving on to the next questions. Again, we had that start date and end date. And then for this project, we determined that it best measured on a quarterly basis. Then again, those same questions, if there's an equity component, we determine that this one would have an equity component because in developing this curriculum, we make sure that it's accessible to hearing impaired and available in multiple languages. So as those have different equity dimensions, there is that equity component that we are able to disaggregate. All right, so we finished looking at some of those tracking measures. Now we'll be looking at that bolded output measure, running through some of those same questions that you'll find on the sample template, which are also the survey. So for this, we're looking at an output measure. This is just attendance because it's a pretty broad measure that could be applicable for a number of different projects. So then the description is just the number of people who actually attended the workshops. So we sent out all the outreach, we've created the curriculum. Now that we actually had these workshops, how many people attended those workshops? Unit measurement, no surprise there, just the number of attendees. And then what's the measurement strategy or data source? We would have some type of registration log where we're counting the number of people who attended. Moving through those same questions, we wanted the measurement start dates and end dates. Looks like this is going to be a bit of a longer term measurement. We'll have a number of different workshops, so we'll be collecting this throughout the length of project, but we'd be able to capture this information on a quarterly basis, or that's when we would be reporting on it. And then looking at that same equity component, drop down yes or no. For this one, we did again determine that there would be an equity component because as we are collecting attendance information at the registration booth, there would be demographic information collected as well as information collected in an exit survey. So if you're able to do that, great, you'd get that information and then you'd be able to disaggregate it. And then finally, we're looking at our last KPI, which is an outcome measure. So it's that bolded one, and I will run through what those questions are. So we're looking at that, like I said, an outcome measure. Name of this measure is the healthier habits after 1 month. So what is this KPI? We're looking at the percent of workshop attendees that reported healthier habits 1 month after the workshop. So workshop is done. What is the result of that? So unit measurement would be a percent, and then the measurement strategy is we had some kind of follow-up survey, right? So we had information about a baseline, and after the workshops, we're collecting information about how did those behaviors actually change, and then we'd be able to compare the two and get a percent out of that. Start date might be a little bit later on after we completed some of the workshops, and then because this will be measured over the course of a few years. In this case, it makes more sense for this one to be reported semi-annually. And then for those last questions, again, does this have an equity component? Yes. How does that information get disaggregated? Because we were collecting all this information, we can disaggregate it by a variety of different indicators, such as race or socioeconomic status. Right, so now that we've finished that section 6, we can move on to the final 2 sections. So this is looking at the impact evaluation, where we ask you to think about whether you'll be conducting an evaluation of the overall long-term impacts of your project, and to let us know if you'll be interested in collaborating with NC Pro and or agency partners to evaluate project impacts. So these are both just simple yes or no drop-downs. And then for the final section, it's just the other considerations. We'll finish the survey off, allowing you to share any additional thoughts, concerns, or questions you may have regarding your project KPIs. So for this example, we said that for this project, there could be some concerns about just the ability to collect that data, which would be important to share, but also that there'd be an opportunity. We figure in this made-up project that we'd be collecting similar information to other projects. There could be an opportunity then to collaborate and have some cross-cutting measures to measure information across multiple projects. So now with all those sections covered, I will be giving it back to my colleague, Natalie, who'll explain how to proceed with the survey template once it's all filled out.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mikey. That'll take us to the next slide. Okay, now that your template is complete, it's time to open the KPI intake survey email. To do so, you're going to click that little blue button in the lower left-hand part of the screen that says Open Update Form. This will take you to the KPI intake survey. Okay. Here are a few screen grabs from the survey. As you can see, some fields are pre-populated with project info that recipients have already submitted to NC Pro via other reports like project and expenditure reports or other information that we have on your project on hand, while other fields are blank. So use your KPI intake survey questions template to copy and paste your pre-drafted survey responses into the applicable fields, or select from the drop-downs if that's appropriate. And then next slide, please. Once you've completed all 8 sections of the survey, click the blue Submit Update button at the bottom of the screen to submit your responses to NC Pro. So once submitted, the responses are saved. However, you cannot save responses without submitting some. So this is why we recommend that you complete the survey in that template we've given you before actually opening the link. And try to complete it in one sitting if possible, using the template survey questions that you've already responded to. And we recommend collaboration in getting responses prepared for this survey, but it can be really tricky to use the system and attempt to get multiple folks. Once you've accessed the survey link to provide responses, it can jumble the system a bit. That's why we recommend collaborating using the template. And then once the template is complete, one person click the survey link, enter the information, and then submit. That'll keep prevent some confusion later on. And then it's important to note that if you accidentally submit the survey before completing it, or if you want to alter responses after you've submitted, feel free to contact your NC Pro grants manager, who will send a new survey link that is pre-populated with all the info you've already submitted. So if you accidentally click submit, but you weren't finished, all of the information you had already entered will be stored and will be sent back to you via a new survey link. And once you open that survey link, you'll see that everything you've already done is pre-populated, and you can just go in there and edit your responses. Let's see, next slide. Reminder that the KPI intake surveys are due on Friday, May 26th, and that there are 2 additional training sessions coming up that are identical to this one. One on Tuesday, May 16th at 1 p.m. and one on Monday, May 22nd at 2 p.m. Feel free to join another session if you think it would be helpful. But again, we will be providing a recording of this session on the NC Pro page. And that concludes our KPI intake survey training session. And now we would like to turn it over to you for any questions you may have about this process. I know some of you folks may be at different stages in the process. Some of you may not have gotten the email yet. Some of you may not have found the email yet. Some of you have already started. So we would love to hear all of your questions. And yeah, I'll open the floor to you. Steve, I see your hand raised.
Yes, my question deals more so with projects that are already complete. This process makes sense going forward if you've got a project that's ongoing and you decide these are your KPIs and this is what we're going to measure, this is how we're going to collect this data. But for projects that ended last summer or last fall, we can't go back and create data that we didn't know we needed to collect at that time. So whereas there may be some tracking measures and there may have been some output and outcome measures that when we were doing the attachments A and B a year ago, we did have that, but there's a lot of this that what do we do kind of after the fact?
Great question. I would like to note that all of the questions in the survey that involve timing do have backdated quarters or months, so that if a project's already finished, you can still enter that data. We're not asking you to submit data on anything that you did not collect. So we're not asking for, theoretically, what could KPIs be for this project? We're asking for data that you have actually collected. So in that case, Steve, you're just going to tell us, I would recommend grabbing, that logic model and just kind of, if you've already, you may have already completed it, but if not, just kind of use that as a brainstorming tool to be like, which of these things, what are our inputs? What are our activities? What are our outputs? And what kind of data might we have on that? I think in some cases, folks using that tool have discovered, oh, wow, we already tracked something that we didn't know was a KPI, just data that you're already going to have about what you've done. So I would recommend taking a look at that logic model, brainstorming a little bit and seeing what data you already have for your project. That's what we're after, is what you did track, not what, it's not theoretical. These are things that you actually have the data to report to us. Does that answer your question?
I mean, it does. It's just I'm thinking that for those projects, there will just be a whole lot fewer KPIs, because if we didn't know to do it, then we didn't know to do it. And I understand the timing of how this all works out, that, but that's just something that we'll figure it out. Thank you.
Yep, I do understand. Andy, were you going to speak to that?
I was going to say there's no, it's not like a good thing or a bad thing if you have 3 KPIs versus 20 KPIs, right? Like it's just, it should reflect as best possible, the important work that went into making these projects successful, and the extent to which you have data, or were able to track data, or can now go identify other measures that would describe then the successful impact of the program. Great, but if you have 3 KPIs for these projects, and it's a couple of tracking measures and one output or outcome measure, that's fine. Especially at the stage that's fine. You've completed the work, so I wouldn't stress about that. Like Natalie said, it's not a graded assignment. We are, it's definitely there's no one size fits all with this. So you use your best judgment. And if there is something that if there's a project where you think there may be an opportunity for further data collection or something like that, which may enhance or round out something that you would think is important to measure for it, we can support you on that. But certainly understanding there are several projects that have completely wrapped up their work, and this is, pulling the performance reporting is a step toward fully closing out the project. So we fully understand that, recognize that. So wouldn't stress too much about it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we don't have any requirement that you must have this many KPIs. We find generally, projects where they've given a lot of thought to this, we find generally 3 to 7 KPIs per project. Again, there may be lots of things that you're measuring. That doesn't mean that that's necessarily a key performance indicator. So I would say that a few really solid performance indicators that give their KPIs that give a person who's objectively looking at your project a good understanding of where you're at, what you've accomplished. A few solid KPIs are better than, a dozen lesser KPIs that are less meaningful or less easy to track. One of the reasons we gave folks a lot of flexibility with this and didn't say you must measure X, Y, and Z is because we look to you as the project experts to know what KPIs would best reflect your progress and processes. And also because we want you to base it on data that you will realistically collect or have already collected. And on the survey itself, it gives you the opportunity to enter up to 10 KPIs. That does not mean you need to have 10 KPIs. You can have 1, you can have 3, you can have 7, you can have 14. But if you need to enter more than 10, reach out to your grant manager and they will expand the survey for you. But don't feel like you need to enter 10 KPIs. We just wanted to give plenty of space for folks who maybe did have more. Some larger projects or more complex projects may have more than 10 KPIs. And we built the flexibility in intentionally so that you could tell us what you're measuring and how you're tracking your success.
And just in conjunction with that, I mean, literally there was a couple of projects that it was completely receipt replacement. So it was, we wrote the nonprofit check, they, put it into their bank account for the amount of receipts that they had lost over that March 2021 21 time period. And so the outcome is that they're continuing to operate basically, and that's about all we can do. Okay.
But that's an excellent measure, right? Like that program was successful if you're able to stabilize their finances with the funding. They're still doing good. Like, I think that's an excellent outcome measure for that type of project.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Sue says quality, not quantity. Yes, I appreciate that.
And want to thank you, Steve, for being a bit of a guinea pig in this process and your feedback early on.
You're welcome.
I see earlier in the chat, Denise did not receive the survey, said it may have been sent to someone else instead of you. We are happy to follow up with you and we can get your contact information or follow up with you on that and see where the survey went and make sure it gets to the right person. If you're going to be the one filling it out, we can absolutely send it to you.
Yes, if you're on this call, you were either forwarded the invite for this from an NC Pro grant manager who you should reach out to if you didn't get the survey, or you were forwarded this invite from someone who was forwarded this invite from an NC Pro grant manager in case that person might have received the survey and you should reach out to them. And then if they haven't received it, they should reach out to an NC program manager.
Hi, Jane. Go ahead.
Hey, I just have a quick clarification. I think yesterday, Andy, you may have mentioned on the interagency call that we shouldn't even open the survey link until we're ready to go in and actually submit. I have opened a few of ours over the past few days, just making sure that everything worked, and some of the formatting was wonky, so I needed to open it to see which project it was for. I just wanted to make sure that we're not going to have any technical issues because I've done that.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah,
I
we're
didn't think
trying to
so, but
prevent
just wanted to
people
confirm.
Yeah, we're trying to prevent people from jumping the gun. We find that just based on folks that have gotten the survey, those who jump right in are the ones that have so many more questions and are just generally very confused and overwhelmed. So that's why we're just kind of trying to push the brakes a little and get folks to click that help link, because we really tried in our guidance to be really line by line. Here's what you do. Don't feel confused. Don't feel overwhelmed. Contact us if you have any questions. So yeah, you're not going to mess anything up by just opening the link. We're just trying to get folks to avoid that, because once you open it, it's easy to be like, oh, I know the answer to this one, and then get started, and then you don't want to lose your progress. So yeah, but no, that won't cause any problems, Jane. But thank you for that question.
Good. Thought so, but just wanted to double check.
No, because the survey link, if you access that and you start putting things in, it doesn't save your progress. We really wanted people to use the template as a collaborative tool with the rest of their team, with the rest of their guidance or their resource documents in hand, so that by the time they opened up the survey link, they were ready to fill it out.
I'm also noticing in the chat that at some point the feed may have gotten stuck. I'm not sure. Mine didn't seem to get interrupted. We'll take a look at the recording, and if there's any missing parts, we can try to clarify that for you. Apologies about that.
Any lingering questions or confusions, we are here to clear this up.
Also, if you wake up at 2 a.m. with a question, feel free to reach out to your NC programs manager. Not at 2 a.m. The next morning, and we'll all work as a team to follow up with any lingering questions. And it looks like at the beginning of the chat we had what was it? Someone who Catherine, who had gone in and was trying to select the counties, all the tier 1 and tier 2 counties, I believe, in the section where it's asking about the geographic scope of your project. And at first it seemed that it would only let you pick one county, but she went back in and it looks like she was able to keep selecting as many counties as she needed. So I'm glad that was cleared up.
Sorry,
Excellent.
on that, but yeah, you're absolutely right. It does work.
I'm so glad to hear that. It doesn't look like it will. Like it looks like a drop down where you just pick one. But if you keep dropping down and picking, it will let you keep logging those. So that's a good thing to flag, is it's not the most intuitive, again, not the most intuitive looking tool. But it does, once you submit it, it will save all of your data. So if you need to go back and rework anything and we resend the link, it will be pre-populated with everything you submitted.
Has anyone else had any problems locating the survey email? Or having to, or did anyone else on this call have to move the survey email out of their spam or junk file? I'm just curious to know if that was a problem for people.
I actually had to move it from junk mail, but it wouldn't let me move it to my inbox. So I moved it to my unread mail. And so it helps me to go directly there because that's the only thing in that box. So I won't lose it or won't get buried. But I didn't have a problem clicking on the guidance for today's meeting, and I'm going to move forward through the template information.
Yeah.
So I'm sure I probably will have questions once I start doing the actual survey. I was trying to take notes, but I do have a question since I'm mentioning that. Those examples that you all shared with us today, are we able to get the examples sent to us as a guide?
Yes, the sample is actually on our website. It's the third resource document. It's under, yes, we'll put a link because we have the survey template, and then we have the survey template sample example, which has all of, it has our fictitious project in there.
Okay. That's my only question.
Yeah.
Yes, and these slides we're going to post on there as well, and a recording of this. So if you need to review that and just take a look, here I'll put in the chat. I'll put a link. Oh, she got it. Great. The yeah, that link should contain all of the resources we're referring to, in addition to that completely filled out fictitious template. Just give you an idea of what goes where.
Okay, that'll be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
We're glad the example is helpful.
Any other lingering questions? Again, this is not your last chance to ask questions. Feel free to email Marquise at 2 a.m. with more questions. No, don't do that. Feel
But
free
you
to
can
reach out.
set delayed response. Like sometimes if you know the muse strikes you, you come up with a really good question, you need to get it down. You can set those emails to like pop into someone's inbox at 9 a.m.
There you go. But yeah, reach out to your NC programs manager, and we will all work as a team to make sure that we clarify any of this for you. It's a bit of a tedious process up front, but I believe that the guidance, if people really dig into the guidance, it's designed to try to make it as smooth a process as possible. So again, reach out to your grants manager with any further questions, and we're going to post this online for you so you can refer to it. And our next session is upcoming next week. And if you feel that someone wasn't in the room who should be at that session, let your grant manager know and they can forward an invite. And thank you all so much for coming. I really hope that this has been helpful, and we're going to do whatever we can to try to streamline this process and make it as easy as possible for you. So feel free to reach out whenever needed. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Have a great weekend, everybody.
Have a great weekend, everybody. Have a happy survey filling out the template.
Thank you so much, folks. Bye-bye.